Have you found yourself navigating a dark night of the soul? Are you craving a deeper connection with the divine feminine? Are you ready to integrate the balanced union of the masculine and feminine within? Then let's get started on the journey towards wholeness to reclaim your sovereign soul. My name is Cynthia Clark. Over the past several decades, I have undergone many dark nights of the soul. My healing journey has been a reclamation of my sovereign divinity. Whether you're just starting out on your self-healing journey or have been exploring techniques for many years, Discover Divinity offers an opportunity to uncover the new possibilities for discovering and reclaiming the innate wisdom within. It is time to discover the new possibilities. It is time to discover you. Hello and welcome to the first ever Discover Divinity Podcast, Reclaim Your Sovereign Soul. I'm your host, Cynthia Clark, and in today's first episode, I wanted to bring you a little bit more information and understanding about who I am and many of the experiences that have brought me onto the path of reclaiming my sovereign soul and living my passion. Now, this journey has most certainly evolved through the years, and so the experiences that I share have different components that really have allowed me to learn and to grow. So I'm super excited for you to step into this space with me and join me. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Cynthia Clark, the founder of Discover Divinity and discoveringdivinity.com. And today I felt like it might be nice to introduce myself to my audience so that you can each get to know me a little bit better and understand part of my journey of what steps it took me to come into this reclamation of my sovereign soul. And it really has been, after devoting several decades uncovering the mysteries and longevity of lasting health and undergoing many dark nights of the soul, that my triumph has proven the power and innate gift that we each have to heal. And as I've stepped into this awareness and this understanding, it really did ignite my passion to come into a space where I would assist others reclaim their own power and find true healing for themselves. And by tuning into my natural gifts to sense the wounds within, I combine my genuine love for others as well as extensive training and education to guide you uniquely on your path to wholeness. Before I get started in sharing some of that path and some of those stories, I wanted to just inform you briefly on some of the sessions that I offer. So at any time as you're listening to these podcasts, they're going to be filled with so many wonderful topics and educational pieces. But know at any time if there is a moment that you feel like you would like a little bit more support, I am here to offer that to you. And as an intuitive guide, a medium, and a healer, I have been able to tune into the deeper roots of individuals where I'm able to see, feel, and hear what specific pains or wounds and traumas need to be released, as well as the greatest gifts that lies within. And since I was a little girl, I have felt and sensed the world of emotion, and navigating the planet with such heightened sensitivity has proven to be a challenge, not only at a young age, but into my adult years. But as I have learned how to really tune into this gift and work into those energies, I have been able to step into a space where I work with individuals one-on-one and help my clients across the board. And some of my favorites, my specialties include inner child healing, ancestral healing, shadow work, mediumship, and guided meditation. And each session really is unique. And so depending on who you are as an individual, what genetic DNA components you have, as well as your birth story and your personal experiences. Those sessions are going to be unique to you because of where you've come from in life, as well as the downloads that I receive and maybe what it is that you need to be working on at that time. And I'm super humbled. I love being able to offer these sessions to my clients, and I'm so humbled. I'm filled with gratitude, as well as really just being able to connect into this source of pure love and healing light, and to be a conduit of guidance and healing. I also have been trained as a certified energy practitioner, as well as holistic health coach, as well as a rapid eye technician and a Reiki master. So I'm able to also use those different trainings and certifications to maybe hone in specifically on something that you're looking for individually, but also be able to pull from all of those modalities and be able to help you. And what I love about the way that we use energy, the way that we use a person on a holistic level, is we are working with the body, but we're also working with the heart, the mind, the spirit, and the energy field. And just like light and color are measured by their vibrational frequency, so is our human body. And we are made up of so many atoms. That is a huge network of communication, and this vibrational frequency of energy is what allows us to be able to pick up on the components of the subconscious and unconscious mind, to be able to come into the space of old belief systems, perhaps negative emotions or thoughts, patterns, experiences, and traumas that have been contained in the body or the cells or the subconscious, like I said. And instead of using a Band-Aid approach, these processes go deep into the root cause of the ailments, so that we can use that holistic health approach to make room for lasting change and true healing and restoration. And I did mention a little bit about rapid eye, so I did want to cover a short amount of information about that so that you can get a bigger picture of that. And rapid eye is a safe and natural way to release stress and trauma. It stimulates REM sleep in an awake state to initiate a powerful release without reliving trauma. So this is what I love about the scientific aspects of what I do, is that we're able to access the whole mind, the body system, so that individuals are able to release traumas and negative memories and belief systems and so much more. And we're working with the physiological aspects as well as the psychological aspects to open up those neural pathways where experiences have become trapped, even all the way into the first time that we were conceived. We have those memories, we have those frequencies that have been stored in the genes and the DNA. And so we're able to use specific modality and techniques to begin to use processes to help activate the communication at a cellular level. And because the neurons turn on in the brainstem, we're able to work with those energy blockages at a cellular level and discharge that through a fast blinking process without reliving incidences. And so this is a great choice, whether you're experiencing personal, family, or relationship issues that you would like to balance long term. And it really helps you step into that personal freedom in freeing yourself from negative and limiting patterns of the past and creating a new reality of joy and health in the present moment. So that's a little bit about what I currently do and I provide as far as the platform, as far as my sessions. Now I would love to get a little bit more into a story about me and some of the experiences in the path that I've gone through. So a little bit earlier, I was sharing with you some of the deep sensitivities that I experienced growing up, and until I was an adult, I didn't realize that not everyone navigated the world so intuitively and so emotionally. And when I look back on that, I realized that those were parts of my spiritual gifts that were coming through, but they were harder to navigate because I didn't know or understand what they were. And so it really was in the space of what I would call maybe one of the roots or one of those parts of myself that I would have to come to the planet and begin to have awareness of and begin to heal from was an early childhood trauma that I experienced. And my parents were actually married. They had 2 little boys at the time, and I was nearing about the age of about 20 months old. And my parents were out to dinner. They were celebrating my mom's birthday at the time and had just gone to attend a football game. Went to dinner while my brothers and I were out at a babysitter's. And, my dad had come and picked us kids up, and they got all of us ready for bed. And then my dad had mentioned to my mom that he wasn't feeling well that night, and he opted to sleep on the couch. And it wasn't until the early hours in the morning that my mom had awoken to my cries, and she went to pick me up in the room and decided to go and check on my dad, only to find him lifeless. And it was when he was about the age of 37, I was about 20 months old, that he had passed away suddenly from a heart attack. And it was a tragedy. It really was a shock for everyone who knew him and loved him. And little did I know, this trauma and his death would haunt me for decades. And it's not something that I really truly began to understand until I was older, because at first I didn't have the verbal communication to express my emotions at the time or to grieve his death. And as I grew, I couldn't explain the longing and the sadness that I would experience or feel in my heart. And this man that I never had cognitive memories of would be a man that I would innately feel connected to my entire life. It was a spiritual connection that I didn't have the ability to explain to anyone, but also with the roots of grief intertwined in this trauma, it was very, very difficult to see anything but the pain that was associated with to not have a father. And when I grew up, I knew very little about him because no one talked about him. It was too painful for my mom to have the loss and the pain as a reminder. So any pictures that we had were tucked away in boxes. The memories of his life continued to stay hidden, especially after she was remarried 2 years later, in order to protect the feelings of her new husband and the future children. So it was a protection mechanism, as well as kind of an avoidance of having to go any deeper with that loss. And really it was a connection to that side of the family, any connection to my dad's side, that really dwindled over the years. Any remnant that I had to hold on to him really consisted of a Memorial Day visit where we silently placed flowers on his grave. And then once a year I would see my dad's dad on Christmas Eve. And it was early on in life that I had begun to experience that repercussion of early childhood trauma in my adult years. And I was so sensitive. I could feel my emotions deeply, but I could also sense the emotions and the energy of those around me. And this innate gift and the environmental stressors would only add to that pot of trauma and fuel its fury. And I continued to feel that deep spiritual connection to my father, but it was something I could never explain. And I never felt safe expressing to anyone because it seemed as if everyone had moved on with their life. I loved him dearly and I missed him so much, but I could never understand why everyone seemed to be fine while I was struggling. And anytime I would think about my father, I had a constant reminder of his death and his absence in my life. And so it was kind of like a noxious weed, this unresolved pain and hurt that would continue in my inner world and would fester and grow. And it really came later on in my life as I started to come to discovering through a diagnosis of multiple autoimmune disorders, as well as struggling with panic attacks and debilitating anxiety, that it really was these dark moments of my life that I had to fight for my right to live. I remember one time in my life where I could barely make it from my bedroom to my bathroom without assistance, and I felt like my world was crashing down on me. And it was in these dark moments of my life that I fought. It was with a fierce determination and a burning within my soul that I held on to, like this innate knowing. It really was a connection into my sovereign soul of who I knew I was and what I was supposed to be on the planet. And I knew I wasn't supposed to be sick the rest of my life. And I was going to do whatever it took to fight for that right to live and save my own life. And with this faith, this determination, in many decades of time that I would do research and training, I found the critical pieces that were missing for my unique blueprint. And it really was in kind of those first aspects, those dark nights of the soul of losing my father, as well as experiencing those autoimmune disorders that having gone through some of those greatest challenges, I started to begin to open up and find the missing pieces, find those parts and pieces that were true for my alignment, and a reclamation of me coming into that space of my sovereign soul. And it really has been in this space of finally coming into true healing, where I did show up and I did my inner work, I did my shadow work, my inner child work, the ancestral work that I needed to do to begin to come into this space that I could truly grieve my dad's death, but then I could also open up some of my greatest gifts, my spiritual gifts, and be able to connect into him in a new way, where it hasn't been connecting to him in the physical sense, but being able to connect to him on a spiritual level has been the hugest gift for me. And as I healed from his death, it really did come into this space of discovering and understanding and knowing who he was, that I began to know and understand that part of who I was on a physical level. It was kind of like an adopted child of sorts, where I hadn't known that part of me, right? I was raised by my mother. I did have my stepfather, but this part of who I was, it wasn't until I did that grief work that I started to find out who he was. I learned about the things that he liked. Maybe some of his personality traits. I started to go on this journey where I would interview all different kinds of people that knew my dad so that I could really get a clear picture. And it was as if there were parts and pieces of my heart that finally came back together. And as I started to put those pieces back together, my physical body healed. Like, it was a beautiful, wonderful experience. And so it really was with those two aspects of Dark Night of the Soul that I did come into this space of creating my passion to then realize that this is what I needed to do on the planet, to really step into my intuitive gifts and to receive trainings, do whatever I could to be able to help others rise above their own traumas, rise above their own dark nights of the soul, and come into a space that they could find happiness and joy. And so I share that first part of my journey because that really brought me into the space of creating Discover Divinity, the Discover Divinity platform, where for many, many years I have offered holistic healing classes and all of that good stuff, where we work with the body, heart, mind, spirit, and energy and the relationships in our lives to find joy and happiness and abundance. And it was in the space of that ongoing journey. I sometimes you think, okay, I'm going to reach this destination and this is going to be it. But it's really interesting sometimes how life teaches us, and it's an ongoing process of where we learn and we grow. And it was really interesting. I actually was planning on pushing publish on my podcast I think it was a little over a year and a half ago. I had everything lined up, ready to go. And then I had another dark night of the soul that I would have to then lean into so that I could get to the space of where I am today. And so this is where I will kind of continue that journey because I do feel like my path has evolved. Some different things have opened up for me to begin to even live in more true alignment with who I am and my passion on the planet. And so it wasn't until it was probably about 5 years ago, the time that I'm presenting this podcast is the year 2025. And it was really interesting. I had been living so many beautiful years of abundance and really a life filled with joy, like so much gratitude to begin to go through such difficult things such as early childhood trauma and debilitating anxiety and autoimmune disorders, to come into a space of what I call a miracle. Like my body was healed, and I have been able to do so many wonderful things. And when I went through this other, per se, dark night of the soul, obviously we don't expect when the dark night of the soul is going to come, but it really had come in a space of me kind of being evolved in my work, coming into my personal connection and knowing and understanding my sovereign soul, really being innately connected to that divine within. And I started to have more and more things open up to me. And it wasn't until I found myself having different things. There were just different taglines throughout the past, let's say 10 years, where I had been given different pieces and perspectives where I'm like, oh, okay, this doesn't feel very good to me, but I'm going to go ahead and just put it on a shelf. And so it really was in that space as I was learning, I was growing, I was coming into more of a deeper awareness of who I was and into that connection with the divine, my pure love experience of feeling even more clear about perhaps what my belief is in that divine source. And it's going to look different for every single listener out there. So I'm not going to necessarily get into details of all of what I believe, but I believe that has transitioned through the years. And as I began to recognize some more shame-based, fear-based, manipulative-based structures, there was almost kind of like a cracking or a breaking apart of my awareness to realize that some of the things that I was and who I was living in my spiritual and intuitive gifts was not acceptable in certain communities and ideologies. And it was, I remember very much practicing in what I've been doing for so many years. And I remember the clergy of my chosen religion at the time come out and very much directly say in their handbook that what was acceptable in their church and their organization was to only seek medical doctors as well as the men in their church and organization that held special keys. And to me at the time, of course, like I respect medical professionals, I respect the men that hold those keys. But for me, they were blatantly making a statement against energy healing. They were making a statement that would then, it would send me into a state of confusion, because for at least the past decade or so prior to that, that is the path that I felt genuinely led to be able to be one of my puzzle pieces, one of those parts that was so intrinsically woven into my healing. And so it just felt off to me, and it wasn't something that caused me to step away or walk away at the time, but I remember just being crushed, and I remember feeling really completely distraught and betrayed that living in my true space of authenticity and in my spiritual gifts were not necessarily accepted in that ideology. And I may not get into a ton of detail at this time, but there were some other experiences that really started to open me up into my path of awareness, of realizing that some of the things that I was told and I was raised with weren't necessarily what was really going on in that system. And so it really took some time for me to try to work through some betrayal trauma and some pieces to me where there was some dishonesty, some things that didn't feel quite right inside of me. And so it really has been through me kind of like peeling back, trying to find out where I land, and dealing with that another layer of a dark night of the soul of realizing that maybe not everything that I was taught about or that was presented to me was all accurate. And so I had to go through an uncovering and unpeeling of sorts. And so it did bring me into kind of this state of starting to question a few things, because as I had gone through this journey, I had really deepened my relationship with God. I had come to know what I felt was the pure love of God, what really was innately connected to who I was, connected to the masculine as well as the feminine components of what I call a source, or what we can call God. Use the language that feels good to you. And so in this particular ideology, it was also very confusing to me because I had gained such a love and awareness of the divine feminine through this journey. Like, it is something that I feel could shout from the rooftops. And I think there are just so many systems. I think there are so many ideologies that are just kind of stuck in an archaic structure. It's so married to old systems that many of these systems haven't had the ability to expand. They haven't had the ability to grow. And because we are in what's called the Aquarian age, I'm going to get so much more into this in the podcast. We have lots and lots of years, thousands and thousands of years, where the divine feminine was swept from the planet. And we haven't had that connection. We've been very innately in alignment with more of a patriarchal structure. And I'll get into those things in a later episode. But although we've learned a lot about a masculine perspective of God or creation, we have had a lot of those beautiful pieces and components of the divine feminine that have been left out. And so it has come into this space where through the years, I have realized there's been so much information that we haven't had through ideologies and structures. We've had a lot of these ideologies confiscate different pieces of information. Like I said, I'm going to get into that in a future episode where I talk about patriarchy, I talk about the Aquarian age, I talk about the divine feminine because I'm super passionate about it. But this is the piece, that I wanted to come back around to, especially in this uncovering and this perspective of especially the past year and a half, where I did have to push pause. I couldn't go forward with my podcast yet because I had some deeper layers of trauma that came up that I was face to face with, that then had me pick up a lot of this betrayal trauma that I had to have to peel back layers even more so that I could step into this space of passion of the divine feminine. And so the way that I look at it is just like that experience when I was little. I was born into a beautiful family where I had my mother and my father. And then at a very young age, my father died. And he was no longer there with me in the physical, nor did I have any information about this man. I maybe had little bits and pieces. I knew he existed. Might have the pictures that were tucked away somewhere where we didn't pull them out. And we really didn't talk about him. I started to realize that this was the same mirror for me with the divine feminine. In my upbringing, I was taught in an ideology of a male god. I was taught that perspective of my creative essence. And that's the only viewpoint I had. And just like an adopted child, when I was talking about the trauma with my father, it really parallels this almost missing or longing that I really have had my entire life. And when I came into a greater awareness about all the things that I've discovered about the divine feminine up to this point. It was like finally putting all of those missing pieces together on a spiritual level, on a sovereign level, to finally feel whole and complete. And so this perspective of the divine feminine is somewhere where I really have stepped into. And as we move forward on this podcast together, you're going to join me for some really great episodes that help us learn so much about the divine feminine, but also ways that we can integrate the divine feminine with the divine masculine. It is both. It is that sacred dance. It is that union that helps us begin to start to come into that space of our sovereign birthright. This is why I decided to name my podcast Reclaim Your Sovereign Soul, because it is our sovereign birthright. We are each innately connected to this source, this beautiful dance of the divine feminine, the divine masculine energies that make us who we are, but also coming back into this space of the heart, this part of ourselves that is always with us, this sovereign connection. And my work is now being able to help teach you how to connect into that pure love source, that healing light that exists within you, because it is your sovereign birthright. It is something that you are innately connected to. And so no matter where you are, whether you're on a hike in the mountain or whether you're at your home eating dinner with your family, or, no matter where you are, it's learning how to intuitively step into your own gifts, into that part of an innate connection into your purpose on the planet. And so those are just a few parts of my story, some of those pieces that have brought me into this deeper passion. I'll probably have a lot more to share as we go on, because some of those things are more fresh for me as far as my journey. But I wanted to get started at least to share this with you so that we can have kind of like this starting point as we move forward into some of the classes that I really felt called to talk about. And so I'm excited for all of those of you that are joining me, and I look forward to having you all catch me in episode 2. Thank you for listening to the Discover Divinity Podcast. If this podcast resonates with you, I invite you to check out discoveringdivinity.com. You will find resources to reclaim your sacred sovereign spirituality. Here, you can join the Discover Divinity community, where we have free online community classes, as well as done-for-you courses and programs. Navigating the unique personal path to wholeness can feel overwhelming at times. If you would like further support or are ready to take your healing empowerment to the next level, I offer one-on-one intuitive sessions in a variety of different packages where we will discover, release, create, reclaim. Discover your innate wisdom that lies within. Release the imbalances that prevent you from living your truth. Create harmony in body, heart, mind, spirit, energy, and relationships. Reclaim your sovereign soul. It is time to discover new possibilities. It is time to discover you.